So I'm going to introduce our panelists and my co-moderator today, our guest moderator, Jessie Thomas, who's over there. Woo!
Hi, guys.
And we have some incredible songwriters, but we also have Martin Vitorino, who I'm on the board of a place called Insight LA, which is a meditation center. Martin is our director of programming, but also very well versed in advocacy for the LGBTQI community and runs transgender retreats. And I've found to be one of the most helpful people in my conversations around identity and identity politics and learning. And I thought bringing him here today is just adding this kind of very educated, sensitive, compassionate voice to our incredible panel here, coming from a slightly different perspective. And then Victoria Monet, many of you know, incredible songwriter.
Yo.
An artist. Jay Hart, songwriter and everyone's here is a songwriter and artist. Everyone wears all hats. Songwriters, artists, performers, and Trey Campbell. So yeah, I'm going to be more quiet today than normal. So I'm going to throw this over to Jessie because she has all the good questions.
Woo! How you guys doing?
Good.
How's everyone? All right, so this is the first time I've done this, so bear with me.
Yes.
But I just want to start with letting you guys get to know these guys a little bit more. So if you guys just kind of want to each take a turn and kind of introduce yourself and let them know how you started in the music business, maybe like a proud career moment, mentors, and like why you wanted to be here today. You don't have to hit all those, but kind of like a...
You have an hour each. We're going to be
Just
here till
an hour?
7. Yeah. You want to start with Trey? Start here.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Trey Campbell. I'm originally from North Carolina, now based in Los Angeles. I got my start in the music industry working at a gay-owned and operated studio called Temple Base. Used to be called Media Temple. I started there as an in-house background singer and grunt worker, just grabbing coffees and what have you. And at the time, they had a growing business of like artist development. They had these young kids that wanted to learn how to like songwrite and to become artists. And I started shadowing songwriters and then started taking sessions myself. And it was in seeing how the kids were forming identity around the songs that I felt like I had purpose in life. So I've been doing that for the last like 6 years, which has been amazing. Proudest career moment, I just recently did the Banks album. Thanks so much. Thank you. It's so crazy to get to work with someone that you're such a huge fan of and to see them like open up and to experiment and to grow as an artist. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Yes.
And thank y'all so much for coming.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jay Hart. I was born in London, grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, and moved to LA 8.5 years ago now. I got my start in music working for this producer, Polo de Don, out of Atlanta. I was his intern for about 2 years. And then I got my way out to LA, signed my first publishing deal, hustled, and worked until today. So that's a very abbreviated version of the story, obviously. I'm leaving out a lot of details. My proudest career moment would probably be I had a #1 in country music with Keith Urban. Thank you. And I grew up in the Bible Belt and went to Christian school and obviously was in the closet during high school for a lot of that. So it just felt validating and it felt quite amazing to know that I could have a #1 in country music as an openly gay man. And yeah, so that's it.
Woo!
I am Victoria Monet. Thank you. I'm from Sacramento, California, and I got my start in music because I came to LA and auditioned for this girl group via Rodney Jerkins, and I made it into the girl group and moved to LA within 2 weeks and signed a publishing deal with him, a management deal with him, and a record deal with him. Wouldn't advise doing that with one person, just so you know. Like, that's a huge conflict of interest. But nonetheless, I saw a lot of people coming in and out of that studio. I got to see Sierra. I got to work with Brandy's vocal producer, who taught me a lot about how to vocal produce now that I do it. And also begged him to songwrite in the interim, so then I got really passionate about songwriting, and like I realized that not every song that I wrote was for me, and so it just allowed me to express myself in different ways, and I just kept doing that. And the proudest career moment would probably be this year. Is going pretty well in songwriting. I got to get 2 number ones this year with Ariana. Thank you. And that means a lot to me because I've actually been working with her since her first album, and I never had the singles. I was always like the album filler records, which were really beautiful, but like it just was really magical to finally get a single and then have it be so successful for a long time. So that was like a really dope underdog type of story internally. And also Billboard, I got to be on the cover of Billboard this summer, which was amazing.
Yeah.
And thank you.
Cover girl.
Thank you. And also coming out this year, that's not like a career moment, but that was a really freeing, like happy place. And I know not everybody's experience is that way, but for me, because I came out on Twitter and I already had people who are in the community following me, it was very like, yes, girl. It was like a supportive thing. So
I sent a tweet.
Yeah.
I sent a tweet.
Yeah. So yeah.
I'm not a part of the music industry, but I'm a fan.
How you got started doing what you do.
Yeah, so as Maria mentioned, I'm the director of programming at Insight LA. It's a Buddhist meditation organization, and I guess my connection to it is that I transitioned, and I'm transitioning, actually. It's a verb. It's still happening, and it's ongoing, but meditation has been such a grounding practice for me throughout that whole experience. And so I really wanted to get more involved with an organization that is sharing that resource with people. And I also lead a meditation group for trans people, and we have a queer meditation group if you're not trans, but also if you're queer. And we have retreats, residential retreats, where you can go away for 5 or 6 days and be in silence and meditate with queer people or trans people. So we have a lot of resources that I'm happy to share about. And I guess like this could be one of my proudest moments.
Yes, Mark.
Like, just being able to be here and being with these really accomplished people, and just being able to be myself in the world after a long time of really fighting for that, and just being able to be publicly myself and feel okay in my body. It just feels like I've arrived in a way.
Yay.
So.
Thank you, guys. I was already intimidated, but just... All right. So I'm just going to jump right into some questions. How does being in the LGBTQA... I wish there was like one thing to just smush that even further, but the family, I think I'm going to say it today to keep it clean. How does being in the family community affect your job, the LGBTQA community affect your job? Trey?
I think it makes us sought after. Like, we've been through so many different struggles, so many different triumphs, that unique perspective is so important to songwriting. And I think because we have such a unique perspective on love and on life, that it truly makes us sought after.
Do you guys feel that way?
I do. I think now, I mean, definitely, I feel like music industry is full of underdogs, and I feel like being a part of this community, you definitely know what it feels like to be an underdog. And I think that, I think more recently, because we have such a strong perspective, and because lots of us have been through character building, things that help us write our stories so uniquely, I think we are sought after. But I don't think that was always the case. I think, obviously, that's sort of more of a new thing.
How does it feel like knowing you started your career in a place that maybe chastised those qualities about you, and then now you're being supported maybe more for it? How does that feel? Anyone can answer that if you feel.
I feel like although we are being supported, there's still a long way to go. There's a lot of people that don't still, and they're very against it, and they may not say it because right now it feels, even though we're making a lot of progress, on the outside it may be more trendy to support us than it is genuine. So I feel like, and I'm coming from a place where I didn't always admit. So like a lot of my career was based on like internalizing it and hiding that fact. So I was able to see and hear conversations that probably I wouldn't have heard if I was just out, because they wouldn't have said it when I was in the room. So I've heard a lot of things that, that are incorrect, and I hope that because we're in the light more now, that we're teaching people how to tolerate, how to love on us, and how to support us, and what the right pronouns are. Like, I feel like we're all just learning. So I think we are kind of maybe superheroes in a sense, just trying to like fight for the path to continue to grow.
I love that. I think we are superheroes.
Yeah.
I know personally, when I was starting out, feeling like I couldn't tell anybody, like even in my lyrics, I was like really shying away from using her or she, just to be like, if I keep it vague, people will relate to me more, because that will, and then, and now it seems more championed to just be like, no, lean into your individuality, the things that are making you, unique, because that's actually what people relate to. And I feel like I always felt that way, but it's nice to have the fear kind of, not removed, but lessened with this kind of resurgence of, or not resurgence, but the visibility growing. On that, what do you guys think, what does an ally look like to you? That's it.
Sorry. To me, an ally is someone who understands and is aware of their own privilege, and is inquisitive and wants to know what the gay experience is like, and not just because it's, like you said, trendy, or because they want a gay friend, but is genuinely wants to use their privilege and their platform to help someone who hasn't always had the same level of acceptance, and build them up and lift them up. To me, that's what a great ally is.
For sure.
Do you guys, when was a moment in the music business side of things, like that you felt maybe surprised by someone's support, or a time where you were like, wow, this is really like surprisingly, like a time someone surprised you with their support? Trey?
I'll be completely honest. Sometimes I get a little nervous working with like male artists that are heterosexual, because you're going into a space that you just don't necessarily know how you're going to be accepted, and you don't necessarily know how you're going to operate in this space. Like, we strive to be ourselves every single day, but in these spaces, we also, as a songwriter, coming from a songwriter's perspective, you want to be able to go into the room and to elevate the room. You want to bring the best out of the artist. So it's sometimes tricky. I recently was just working with John Legend, and he was so welcoming and so warm, and there was no issue whatsoever. And while I was giving him space to be completely who he is, he was giving me space to be completely who I am as well, which was really beautiful.
Yeah. Do you guys relate to that?
I definitely do. I mean, I felt really supported by my team. And I mean, obviously that's kind of a prerequisite for having a really great team, but just feeling like a priority and feeling like they want the parts of me that I at one point was ashamed to show people, they want to showcase and are actively trying to, and sometimes still it surprises me. I'm like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
like I'm allowed to do this, like, and this is a beautiful thing. So yeah, I feel a lot of support from my team, and that made me feel good.
Sometimes I'm surprised by, on what you said, Trey, like when I walk into a session and, you know, we'll work with, you know, a Christian country artist. And in the world, I'm, you know, that's terrifying. Like that's like you know, I'm dealing with my own stereotypes in that. And I have fear because of what I've seen in the media or in the world. And I'm like, oh, this person probably hates me and whatever. And I just try to, like you said, Trey, go in with the best attitude and just with as much hope as I can. And more often than not, I am very surprised by the connection I'm building with people that seem so different than me or in such a different world than I am. And it actually helps me get through the world in general, because when I see all the bickering and the fighting on Twitter and whatever, and then I get to go create a song with, you know, somebody who has nothing in common with me in the sense of like what the world tells me, but then you realize you have everything in common. You just sit and write a song, and it's really beautiful. So
Right.
I think that's a reminder for all of us to not, you know, dilute ourselves in fear of acceptance, because I think that does create more of a divide. If we are going to learn and figure out how to work in these spaces together, we have to remove those stereotypes. So that's amazing that you've been able to do that. Because
I know it sounds incredibly cliche, but I strive every single day to try to be a good person, because you would be surprised the response you get if you take every single one of the experiences that you're having and make them special. Like, I've just met so many of you today that I don't even know, and I feel honored that you all came out and are supportive of this panel, and I think that's reciprocated, because you feel that, like, I'm excited that you're here, and you reciprocate that. So I know it's very cliche in a world where social media rules, but like the human interaction is so important.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Yeah, thank you guys so much for being here.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
I think there is this assumption that the entertainment business in Hollywood and LA we're living in this progressive culture, and there's all this tolerance. Have you experienced the opposite of that in terms of going into your daily life? Have you had experiences where it's been more of a struggle, or you felt?
I mean, I definitely feel like there's some resistance to complete acceptance for some people because of how they grew up. Just like how I grew up has affected me and shaped me into who I've become, and my willingness to accept others. I think some people don't have that experience, and so I definitely can tell that there is still some of that out there. And then also sometimes there's sort of a people want me to be this stereotype, you know, they want me to fit into this box as what they see as, you know, a gay songwriter or a gay artist. And it's a very two-dimensional thing. I'd say probably I come across that more than just non-acceptance, but it's the smaller sort of micro things that you don't notice unless you're someone who's grown up having to hide themselves, that you know what that looks like.
Like what would give us an example of that?
I mean, just not thinking that I'm right, for instance, not thinking that I'm right for certain genres or to work with certain people, because just the assumption that I can only do this because I'm a gay man, for instance, you know, and you're not necessarily saying that to say it, but you can feel it. And I think all of us are very diverse and very good at what we do and don't have boxes as far as our capabilities. So that's something that I've just one thing off the top of my head that I've noticed.
We were just talking about this at Out to Brunch that's sponsored by Milk and Honey. I feel like there's a tendency to only have one gay person in the room. I'm like such a fan of Hart, and I think he's incredible, but we haven't worked that much because I feel like if Hart's in the room, then they'll pass on having me in the room because they feel like a quota is filled, if you will. So I would love to like change that because like Hart has had a completely different walk in life than I have and has a completely different perspective on life than I have. And just because we're two gay identifying males, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to write from the same perspective.
The gayest song ever.
Right.
Yes,
right.
literally. They're
Just
like, hold on, too much.
Right. Just a Carly
Too much,
Rae
pull it
Jepsen
back.
smash.
Literally.
Speaking of that, I have this question that gets me a lot in sessions. What do you guys think the appropriate response is to someone saying that's so gay? And has that happened in your sessions? Because it's happened in mine, like 3 times.
I mean, I feel like that's so old also. Like I remember people saying it in like high school as a term, and I wasn't as aware and sensitive to that it's being used as a negative term. But like, it depends who says it, I think also.
Yeah.
Like, if it's someone who's proud of it and it's like, it's kind of a good thing, then fine. But I think maybe the response is just to let somebody know. Don't do it in front of people because I think people don't respond well with embarrassment. But pull them to the side when you get the chance and like, just so you know, when you use this as a derogatory term, it's offensive to other people in the room, and like maybe you should just replace it with a different word that doesn't apply to people. You know, like that's lame instead of like a whole sexual orientation.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Anyone else have?
What do you think, Jesse?
What do I think?
Yeah.
Shit. Well, I will say that I've been cowardice in the moment. I've been just like brushed it under, acted like I haven't heard it. I'm not proud of that. And there's been moments where I've waited till after the session. I actually sent a dude a text. I was like, hey. And I softened it too much. I was like, I know you're really great. You're super great. But I just kind of noticed. And I couldn't have just, said it like, damn. But I did say it. And I responded. I said something along the lines of, that's really offensive, and something similar like, let's find a better word to use. And he was very apologetic and said, consider it removed from my vocabulary, is what he said. So,
Yes.
and I tried to, I think an important thing to remember in this is, like, even though that makes my blood boil when I hear things like that, I think it is an important thing to remember. It is like a conversation at the end of the day. We all have to be like, if we are going to create change, we have to, I guess, be the bigger people sometimes. Unfortunately, just being minorities, like, you have to just kind of take another fucking blow, I guess, and say, how can I turn this into an educational moment rather than like, internalizing and getting mad. And I'm not a pro at handling these types of things, which is why I come to Reboot. But but that's how I handle it. I think it's right. You should say it live there if you feel it's a space to do so, and if not, say something later. But if you feel like you want to or need to say something, I think it's important to do that.
I think just personally it's really important for people to know why obviously language is ever evolving, and it may seem like silly to some people, but I think that my goal is always to kind of explain to people, like, when you grow up hearing that's so gay like all the time around you, and you associate it negatively within yourself, and you know that you're hiding this part of yourself, it becomes a constant reminder that there's something defective with that you are somehow defective, you know. And so there's so much of undoing that once you come out, and it takes years to fully undo that shame that was just a silly quote unquote comment, but you've heard so many times throughout the course of your life. So I like to remind people of that, because I think people don't understand why it's important, and I think that's our job as well.
Yeah.
Can I ask Martin that question? Because I feel this is outside the music business. It's sort of a general microaggression. Like, how do you advise people on that? Those kind of confrontations.
I feel like y'all have done such a great job of responding to that. I think where maybe my focus would be more on how it impacts you when you hear that. Obviously, whoever can, it depends on who's in the room and how much power you have. Like, you can't necessarily always tell your boss or somebody you're depending upon, like a producer or something, to, you know, set a boundary with them, because sometimes you just don't have the power to do that. But as much as you can, I definitely encourage it, and I know that it's hard to do that. But for, I guess the shift I would do is to think about, for you, if you're not queer and you hear these things, that like it would be great to lift the burden off of us so that you could take it on, because generally you probably do have more power in the room, and people are more likely to listen to you than us, where it seems like, oh, we're just complaining, or we're always the one having to stick up for ourselves. But I think it's such a relief when somebody who is not queer, not trans, actually steps in and corrects somebody, because it helps us feel safer. And if you are queer and you hear these things, I think it's really important to acknowledge that even something so simple as "that's so gay," like, it impacts us. And we tend to have like walls to try to protect ourselves, but like, we're porous beings, and it always gets in. And so we have to be really conscious and attentive, and not just queer people, but also women and people of color, that these things can stick, and that we need to consciously offer ourselves affirming and loving, compassionate phrases to offset some of that toxicity that comes from people's ignorance, really. So just reminding yourself how beautiful you are and how wonderful you are, and seeking out the people who can affirm that in you, because it's a daily battle, really, to truly love yourself in a world where you're not necessarily loved or appreciated. So definitely a lot of self-care around that, and tenderness, because it does hurt when people don't see you or don't respect who you are.
Yeah, I think it's also important to like kind of turn the question back on them. Like, if they're saying "that's so gay," what does that actually mean to you? Because Jesse, I think you're so right in making it a teachable moment, but I think in order to properly like educate someone, you kind of need to understand where they're coming from. And 90% of the time you'll find out that they don't even like know what that phrase means and how much it does impact us. So it's really important.
Yeah. I find that my biggest challenge, I think, is I had to spend my whole life kind of overcoming my own homophobia, which is a weird thing when you're, you know, queer and you like kind of hate yourself. You don't even know it. And then once you finally like, no, I'm pretty tight, this is a thing I'm gonna do. And then you finally like cut your hair off, and then you're just like and then now you finally made it to this side where you're like visible, and then now you gotta like teach other people now. It's like I just spent my whole life like teaching myself the thing I now have to teach you, which is, because, you know, I always think that's a weird thing about, you know, being queer is like I was homophobic, you know, like that's such a weird thing. Like you said, you hear this your whole life, that you actually think there's something wrong with me. So it is exhausting to feel like we now have to stay light and cute and fucking like say these things to people. But I think it is important, and it just shows our incredible resilience as queer people to stand up again to the adversity and just make it easier for the next round of people, if Earth allows, to just few light topics.
That's another panel.
It's the end of the world. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I really encourage everyone, straight or not, to really be excited about this new climate where we are having these conversations. Try not to get so upset by people's ignorance, because we already had to deal with that ourselves. Okay. How do you guys think we can increase or make the LGBTQ voice louder as not entertainers, but as people that are writing songs, with your voice, the reach that you guys have? Are you making efforts to increase visibility? And if not, well, obviously you are because you're here, but if not, you can leave. No, and if so, like, what does that look like?
I think personally it looks like you being yourself, really, and outsourcing to other people who don't have the access that you have. I feel like when I think about this community, I think that LA has a certain, although we have a long way to go and it's not all the way safe and everything's not perfect, we are in my head in some kind of like more accepting bubble in LA. If you took this bubble and put it in middle America, like, it would be very different. You know what I mean? So I think using social media could probably help to create interest for other people to do this type of thing in their communities where it may be a little more dangerous, less people, a little more, daring. But I think us as champions and showing people that these outcomes really matter, we can probably have teams in other places, like in Arkansas, in Arizona, like places where it's really not popping for us, you know what I mean? People are like begging for those types of things, and I think the more successful we are in our careers and the more visible we are, it's just more inspiring, and people are gonna be able to more courageously jump on board with their own journey and like create communities where they are, that they can feel supported in, because we're in LA. Like, I feel like even my mom, my family is like, oh, you went to LA? When I came out, she was like, that's just some LA shit. I'm like, no, it's not. I've been like this my whole life. I just didn't tell you. But yeah, I just think we need to like inspire people who aren't in such a safe place to also do these types of conversations. So.
Do you think there's this wave of artists that typically maybe 10 years ago would, like Lil Nas X or Frank Ocean coming out, does this have an impact? I know it has. I was just home in England with my nieces who are 12, 11, and I was trying to explain to them how my daughter has a stepbrother who's dating a trans man, and we were trying to unpack that for and she's just like, and then my daughter's ex-nanny is also transitioning, so. And they were like, wow, there's so many gay people in LA. And it was just like, to them, it was just this other world. And I was like, no, they're here too, but it's just, you're not, the visibility maybe, even you're talking about Middle America, I would say, in other countries and outside of this sort of creative bubble that we're in. And I think one of the reasons for doing this panel is, and some of the other things that we're doing with Reboot is, it seems to me, from the way I grew up, that the creative community should be the leaders in the social progressive conversations, that they should be the ones stepping out and showing kids who you can be. That was certainly true for me with role models of women and Madonna, and seeing these kind of different kinds of models of who you can be in the world, that for kids, the artists and the songwriters they look up to, and like your social media identities really empower someone to go, wow, if they can do it. And I just want, like, have you seen that impact in the rooms? Have you seen people more willing to step into their identities?
I definitely see that. And I think that most people in the creative community, especially in LA, consider it part of our responsibility to be honest and share our stories as truthfully as we can, because we know, for many of us at least, that we didn't have people that we could look at when we were growing up as sort of a representation of what we could aspire to become. I guess in some ways, yeah, but especially as part of the LGBTQ community, there wasn't a whole lot of that for me growing up. So yeah, I think it's a big part of our job to push things forward, and I think art has always been that, you know, and I think that we, as part of the creative community, we just sort of, that's what we do.
For sure.
Got anything, Trey?
I think something that I do in sessions, I work with a lot of artists, and it's about creating a safe space for people to just be who exactly they are. And I think if more people were open to doing that just in their natural lives, you would find that more people would be more genuinely who they are.
Yeah. One thing I learned in doing sessions is when you create like a safe space, kind of learning the gifts that provides. Because you don't often, before I was a songwriter, wasn't going into rooms with strangers every day and dumping your whole life story on them within 10 minutes. But in doing that, I've really learned to appreciate and value like a true safe space where I'm saying things I've never said to people, like strangers who are now telling me things. And there has been times where I've worked with artists who have told me their sexuality is different than what they tell the world or present to their teams, and that is such a cherished thing about, you know, the job. And I think that's one way I can help increase visibility, is creating these safe spaces. And I think that's such an honor of our jobs, is to kind of have these little therapy sessions where we can just say what we want to say, and then, you know, grow with each other and learn also just how good it feels to accept yourself and talk about these things. And hopefully they end up in the songs and then to the world, but you have to start with just admitting or talking about him, and that needs a safe space. So yeah. Okay. I want to do a few like rapid fire questions for Martin. Just for some, like, there's a lot of times we learn, you know, there's a lot of new language coming in that sometimes I feel like behind on. I'm trying to like stay on top of, and I just kind of wanted to have a moment there. You can let us know a little bit more about some of the definitions of these words. So, rapid fire, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. What is the difference between sex and gender?
So sex is the biological or physiological characteristics that are determined when you're born. So immediately the doctor says it's a boy or it's a girl, and usually that's determined by whether or not there's a penis. And that is the two options that tend to be offered, male or female. But there is also people who are intersex, who are born with genitalia and physiological characteristics that are not easily distinguishable as male or female. So it's something actually that we should be aware of, that there are not just two biological sexes, there are many. And that is different from gender, which is the inner sense of who you are. So like when you close your eyes, not attached to your body parts, but just imagining what is your gender. And everybody's got a gender. And everybody's got a biological sex. It's just that not everybody's biological sex and gender match up. So some people whose biological sex and gender do match up, so you're assigned male. When you close your eyes and imagine you really do feel like male or a man, then you would be cisgender, which is, cis is a Latin word for same. So the sex and the gender are the same. So probably most of you here are cisgender. And then there are transgender people whose biological sex, the sex they're assigned at birth, so I was assigned female at birth, but when I closed my eyes, and ever since I was a child, I knew that I was male, and as if my brain and my soul were male, but I was inside of a female body. And so that is my experience as a transgender person, meaning they're not the same. My biological sex and my gender are not the same. So that's
amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you. What is the gender binary?
So the gender binary, well, I kind of alluded to that, meaning that a binary just means there are two things. It's like either or. So we see that a lot in black and white, so male and female, as if there are only two. And part of that challenge that we are coming up against is that there are actually multiple genders and multiple sexes, and that creates a tension because of the expectations that you be either male or female, and all of the norms that come with each. So if you're a female, you have to have long hair, and you have to have your nails done, and you have to love makeup, and you love shopping, and you have to have a certain body type, and that those can become oppressive. And they're based on cultural, values. Different cultures see those things differently, but those expectations weigh on all of us, whether you're aware of it or not. We're always being pushed and pulled in different directions on how to perform our gender in a way that's palatable for people. And that becomes a challenge when you really just live outside of that, when who you are is outside of these expectations or stereotypes, and which most of us actually are, whether we admit it or not. So the challenge is when we're pressured to be anyone other than who we are. And
Thank you.
and then non-binary, I feel like I should mention, because it doesn't really get a lot of traction for people, but people who are non-binary are identifying as something not male or female, that it's something altogether. It could be a combination. They feel like their gender is both male and female, or maybe primarily male with some elements of femininity and integrated there. And non-binary people face a lot of challenges because, again, of that binary, the expectation you be male or female. There's either a men's bathroom or a women's bathroom, but if you identify differently, there's really not a space for you. And so there are a lot of non-binary people are beginning to get more and more visibility, but it is still very challenging for them.
Thank you. This is what I was going to ask. How do you know what pronoun to use when referring to someone when you are unsure?
So I run into this challenge a lot personally because as a trans person, I feel like people think that I should know what other people's pronouns are, but I have no idea. And for me, my pronouns are he and him. I identify as a man. And what's helpful for me is when people just ask what my pronouns are. And you can do that in a respectful way, like, hey, just so you know, my name is Martin. I go by he, him pronouns. What's your name? And are there any pronouns you'd like for me to use when referring to you? So it's nice to kind of start out with offering your own pronouns because it leaves room. It's not just the other person being vulnerable, sharing theirs, but you're also willing to lead with that kind of vulnerability and sharing your own. And if you don't know someone's pronouns, you could always start out with they, which is a gender-neutral pronoun. So like, they went to the bathroom, they'll be right back. And until you develop a little bit more intimacy with them and you can find out their pronouns. But until you really know, it's nice to not assume people's gender.
Just to touch on that, I think it's important to not make assumptions of anyone's gender or sexuality. And if you need to know, or like you said, want to know because you want to refer to them the right way, like you said, I've always appreciated just being asked. People do ask me what my pronoun is pretty regularly, so I've never been offended by that. I feel like people are often terrified. Something that happens with me is if someone catches me from the side or behind or something, someone's like, "Hey, dude," or "Hey, buddy," and I'll turn around and they're like, "Oh my God," and I'm just like, I'm not embarrassed, but they are, and I'm like, I'm immediately taking care of them. I'm like, it's okay, I get it a lot. And he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, the lighting, I've been drinking." And I'm like, it's okay, Brian. But even that shows me that people are terrified to to fuck it up, and I feel like that goes to show in a weird way it's just adorable because this person had an emotional reaction to possibly offending me with something that isn't offensive, but like it is because of their teaching, and that's just a funny thing that happens. So I do think that if you want to know, just ask, and that's one of the most respectful things you can do, is just show an interest of wanting to learn, and just ask. And that's like a cool way to ask what's your pronoun. It also makes you sound like you really know what's up. Hey, what's your pronoun? It's just like so 2019. Okay, I had one more question before we kind of toss it over to the audience, but I just kind of, the most important question and maybe of the day was, I just wanted to let,
Yeah.
when will we start acknowledging that Robin isn't gay?
That is a very important question.
Guys, that was a joke. It was a joke. Loosen up. We don't have to talk about Robin being gay or not, but I actually saw that the other day when I was like doing research.
Right now, today.
Huh?
Today, it's the day.
Yeah. Well, when I was doing research on this, I not research, but just trying to like come up with good questions and stuff, I looked and like randomly this article came up about Robin. It was like, Robin married to man, and like all these people like having a big opinion about it, and I was like, Robin's fucking straight? What? Anyway, I just thought that'd be an interesting thing. We don't have to talk about it. I do always think that's an interesting thing that happens when we like have like a queer hero that isn't like Britney Spears or something. You're just like, I love that. And I think that's it touches back on like a good ally. What does a good ally look like? It's like Robin and Britney Spears, like people that fight for you, use their platform to let the community know you're creating safe spaces all over the world for people like in the family, and it's just really beautiful. Cool. So if you guys have any questions for the panel, let's open it up. Go ahead.
So the question is, how do you find your tribe as you're coming into the songwriting community and find the people that can support you? Is that the question? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, for me, it was like trial and error. Like you get into the space and you either click with someone or you don't necessarily click with them. And it's about having like interests outside of just getting that cut. Like somebody that's going to be there for you when you're going through a hard time and just need to talk to somebody and have tea. So I think first and foremost, you just need to put yourself out there, because you would be surprised. You may look at someone and be like, oh, we're probably not going to get on. And then that person turns out to be your best friend in and outside of music.
True.
Anyone else?
I would say, the same thing. It's basically energy based for me. I feel like I'm really sensitive to negativity or people's energy, and you can always discern that. And I think maybe just applying it to school, like I never based my friendships on their grades. It was always about who I vibed with. And so like if you treat the music industry the same way, you come up together, and you may make a whole movement, and it's not based on who has this placement and who's the executive, because people can also sense that. I just think it's about who you really genuinely eye to eye, like you're funny, or I feel good with you, or like we like the same food. You're kind of vegan? Okay, cool, we can eat together. You know what I mean? Like all of that, all of those things, the natural things, just human things is how you should base it.
Yeah, I think also just go to the places where you feel like you make your best work and you're the most comfortable, not chasing the kind of other stuff. It might get you a quick win, but I think you build a community by like truly, nurturing the important things and one at a time. Because a great art will I think get you very far. So go to the places where you're going to make that art and enjoy yourself.
So I'm also a believer in creating your own spaces. I think people are always like, let me find a space. It's like, well, make one as well. And I think Jessie has you should talk about that.
So something I've done just to kind of combat the lostness or feeling like not having a space, I created this evening called Jessie and Friends, which is, it's an all-inclusive showcase of songwriters and artists. I do it at Hotel Cafe every few months. And essentially, it's just a place for people to share their work in a very supportive, quiet, safe environment, to interact with each other, get to know each other, and it happens every 2 months. It's nothing that extravagant, but it's something that I created just to feel, like you said, a sense of community. And that's another great thing you can do. You don't need a venue and a showcase, you know. Find a way you can build community around you. I think it's so important, especially as writers, and you know, you get tossed around every day. So when you have a sense of realness, something that just grounds you a bit in a very kind of crazy world, it just makes you feel like more connected to the people around you. So highly recommend doing that. And yes, you can come to Jesse and Friends as well. I'm going to turn it to more questions. Also, just know if anyone's nervous to ask any questions, like, safe space. There's no embarrassment here. Even if you feel like you might sound a little silly, you're good. Right there, purple or pink.
Welcome.
Hey.
Hi, Cody.
Woo.
That's a hard one, because I feel like there is a certain hierarchy and there's prejudices within this community that I try not to think about it so much, although it is affecting me in probably rooms that I can't even hear. Maybe I don't know what the conversations are when they're putting sessions together, or when they're, you know, asking for certain people to be in the room. I don't know if it's because of my color or my sexuality or my, you know, anything. So I just try to genuinely within myself be comfortable and talk to other people who you feel maybe you could talk to people who are similar and create friends, make friends that, you know, can kind of relate to you more. And not to exclude other people, because obviously they can offer opinions and their experience as well. But I just think maybe people who are similar to you, just to vent to or run to, is helpful. But I really try not to focus too much on it, because I can't. It's not something that I can control necessarily. So just be so good at what you're doing that it doesn't matter. You could be an alien and they're like, I need your beats.
I like coming up in the music industry. One question that would always make me a tiny bit upset is, oh, like, you're a songwriter, so what do you do, like hip hop? Because of my color. And instead of like sitting in that and being upset and becoming offended, I chose to strive every single day to be the absolute best. So there's no question. Yeah. Yeah, of course.
All right, in the back in the hat.
Hey, I'm Alyssa. I'm a songwriter and producer, and my question is, so I'm not like I was very, very similar, like Egan myself, for a lot of my life, very internalized homophobia, all that wonderfulness. And now I have a girlfriend who I love, and she's amazing, and I want to, like, in sessions I might just like randomly offhand be like, oh yeah, well, like mention my girlfriend, and people are like, wait, so wait, are you lesbian? And they like want to ask me questions like, do your parents know? Like all these questions, and I'm just like, whoa. I don't really want to get into all of that. Like, how do I say that respectfully while still being able to have like a good open session where we create something honest and wonderful?
I think it's all contingent upon where you feel like the question is coming from. If they're asking this to get to know you, maybe it is a good idea to open up, because they truly just want to know who you are. if you feel like it's not a safe space and they're just prying, then you could just be like, hey, this session's not necessarily about me, it's about you. I'd love to write this type of song. There's all different kinds of ways to like direct the session as well. And they're giving you the power to do that, and it's your choice which direction to go. But I always say be open, because you'd be surprised. So many people just don't have a reference point. They don't necessarily have someone in their life that lives the same lifestyle that you do. So just be open.
Yeah. I think it goes on to that thing again where it is a bit annoying to have to, you know, educate yourself on all this and then feel like you have to turn and do that to someone else. But I agree. I think even though we feel like these questions are offensive and coming from a place of negativity, sometimes it is just they don't have the teaching or the education or the life that we had that gives them that perspective. So it just seems like another question, like, what did you eat for lunch? And you're like, thanks. Where do I start? So I think just if you feel comfortable talking about it, talk about it. And if not, just say, yeah, maybe we can talk about this later, but I want to focus on the song right now, or whatever you need to say. But be confident in you know, knowing you don't necessarily owe anyone that, but
It's true.
you don't have to be you don't have to have a reaction. And if you are, it's okay, we're human. But I think it's something to work on. I don't know how, good luck. But okay, any other questions?
How can the straight community be better allies?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would say use anything you can to sort of amplify the voices around you who maybe aren't as heard in the conversation as much in whatever way you can. I mean, if you're not someone who, you know, has a massive platform yet, then you can do that in small ways in your daily life, or just be a supporter, be someone that understands the struggle, and just, yeah, I mean, use what you have to kind of affect your environment around you and the people around you, and change their minds if their minds need changing, and just talk to people on a human level about it would be my advice.
Maybe Martin, you can offer something?
I was thinking of the way that I feel like sometimes people respond to me as a trans person, but also I feel like when I was living in the world just as a queer person, that sometimes people are actually really cool with you, and so they're communicating that by like not addressing that you're queer or trans. So they're like wanting to be respectful, and so like I don't want to bring it up because I don't want to be disrespectful. But I think actually that creates this like distance because we're not acknowledging what's here. And I think that's the case sometimes too in the way white people interact with people of color, is like not acknowledging that there is actually a difference in race. And so I think the respectful thing is to actually acknowledge that you see a person and even ask them about what it's like for you. Because I think we're so afraid of offending people, and that's coming from a good intention. But in doing so, like, we are creating this distance between us by not acknowledging what's right in front of us. So I think to be just curious or honest and say, I don't really know how to ask this, and I'm not really sure if I'm prying, and you don't have to answer, but I'm just curious, like, what's it been like for you as a queer songwriter? The kind of questions that Jesse and Maria have been asking, you can ask your colleagues and your friends. And I think you'd be surprised that we're like dying for someone to ask us questions. Like, please ask me about my life, because there's so much to share. But we don't want to also impose that on people, and we don't know if you're a safe person. And so like, if you are a safe person and you genuinely do care, like, take the risk of making yourself available and being curious so that you leave room for us to share. Like, maybe one of these people will be in a room with you and they could share with you, hey, I need you to jump in when this person does this so that I don't have to do it. And then you'd be like, got it, next time I'll be on it. So, but you would never discover that unless you were vulnerable enough to acknowledge that someone is a person of color and they're queer or whatever their identity is. So it requires a little bit of vulnerability on the part of people from more dominant groups to make themselves available.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think also just staying, one of the things I was reading is a lot of people don't stick up or say something because they don't want to be assumed part of the community. Like, they want to be assumed gay or something. And because that would be awful. But I don't know if anyone relates to that, but I think, you know, just understanding that that doesn't make you gay or any different than you are. Another thing that I always notice is when there's any kind of movement online, you know, like Trans Visibility Day or whatever, and you see, I'll see so many posts from my community, and then like never from like my straight friend from high school or something. And when it does happen, I'm always like, oh, thank you, that's amazing. It's so shocking. So I think a small gesture for even if you're you know, if you're not if you're not queer, just those little things, whether it's a social post or not, just those little moments to be like, hey, I'm a straight person, but I'm an ally, and I just want to let you guys know, like, this is a thing I support and I will show up for. And, you know, it is scary, the same way of, like, coming out. It's not the same, but it's like, it is a bit of thing to say, I support this community. So I think getting involved in those little ways just by...
I think that's true of any social justice, though. I think there is this feeling that the non-dominant groups, the burden is on them to fight for their own acceptance, when actually it's the groups with power and the groups who are dominant that can ease that passage much more. So think about the civil rights movement, and we've had these, when we first started doing Reboot, it was all women, and the men that showed up, I was like, thank you, because it isn't just like us talking to each other about, or the LGBTQ community talking to each other about what they're struggling. There's incredible value in that, and affinity groups, but actually the movement and the progress is when the dominant groups step out and support, whether it's people of color, whether it's women, whether it's, you know, the family.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
I agree. I think one way to help that you're already doing is being here. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
And also, I think you should treat today almost like you've gotten some seeds of information. And I'm not saying go into the streets and have informative pamphlets and stuff, but I feel like you will be in rooms that we aren't going to be in. So if there's any chance to educate people in those rooms, it's just a helpful seed to plant there. Make it
And
cute,
we will have
keep it
audio
nice.
available, so
Yeah.
you can point people.
You just play the tape.
Just remember how much louder your voice is as a straight person. Like, it's like you can have 100 people, gay people, being like, listen to us, and then like a straight guy's like, listen to us, and then they're like, yeah, we should. It's absolutely crazy. So keep in mind your power and how much it means to the community as an ally. Right here.
Well, I think she's asking, like, how do you be an ally without taking spotlight or platform away?
Thank you,
from the
Maria.
community?
I would say
We got there, girl.
I would say like the goal is for us all to live as one in my eyes. So I feel like, you know, that us exchanging places normalizes things, because I do plan on being in majority straight events and perform. Like, I'm gonna take the opportunity, and I feel like in the vice versa, you should. And if there's an opportunity to bring someone who's queer in the community along with you on that stage, and that's a plus. But I don't know that we should separate ourselves so much. I think the idea is normalizing it so that it's an even playing field. That's all we want. We don't want it to be like we're better. We just want everyone to see us as equal, all of us equal. Yeah. So I think performing at places like that opens eyes and brings people who maybe wouldn't have pay attention to you, and then you kind of lay up somebody else maybe within your set could be helpful, or speak about it during your set. You know, like little eggs that you can plant should be the case. But I don't want anybody to self-sabotage because they're not of our sexual orientation. You know, like, I think you should take the opportunities.
Yeah,
I think it's just about being conscious that there are places that are designed to be safe spaces for the communities, whether it's POC or women, and they're designed to be safe spaces. And then often it's kind of clear whether the event is for allies and is a broader invitation than if it's, you know, this is really a safe space for people who are sharing an experience to share their experience with each other. So I think it's also just being intelligent about where you're inserting yourself. I mean, I have different experiences in terms of the POC thing, because I fit into both. I'm brown, so I fit into both categories. So like really understanding in America, walking into a POC group is different than it is in England, and knowing, knowing what you're trying to accomplish. Also knowing what your intention is. If your intention is to support, or if your intention is to kind of, assuming your intention is not to take away anything, but just being really clear on intention.
Yeah.
Just to frame it, it's like, how do you navigate the commercialization of the queer community?
Yeah,
And
how do you celebrate it and still be part of Pride Month, but not be a quota that the music industry can shine a light on for only 1 month? And then,
I don't necessarily know that it's up to us. I feel like because we're trying to make progress, we can't assume other people's intentions. We just have to, take the support as it comes right now. And if you feel that it's not genuine, then you don't have to be a part of the event or shop at that certain store. But in my opinion, I feel like it probably came from these are big companies. There's a lot of people who plan the events. There's probably someone in that building who feels and identifies how we do. So I don't want us to be so picky, I guess. Like, people are trying to support it, and I know that it's a business, and I know, there's a lot of reasons behind why people may do something, but I feel like if you look deeper, there may be someone, who feels the same way, and it's genuine somewhere.
Yeah.
And it helps somebody just by seeing a rainbow at Levi, like, okay, like, I can shop, you know what I mean? And it may have been for the wrong reason somewhere in the building, but also at the same time there could be someone who feels, or someone who works there who feels more comfortable, someone who's in the corporate rooms, and it happens for Black people too. Like, we're kind of like doubling down a bit, so I just feel like it takes a little bit of discernment to where you want to support, but we should all be celebrating that people are willing to, like, have us represented a little more.
And also just acknowledge that it's messy. Like, you're trying to change the entire thought process of a culture. It's not going to happen perfectly on this tightrope of everyone gets it perfectly right with tone. And so I think just acknowledging that it's messy and take advantage of it where it's actually there to help. And I mean, maybe not self-sabotage in terms of if the tone is a little wrong, or the tone is, unless it's outwardly offensive. And I think just take it for what I said, take it for what it is, which is there's intention there to open the conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of one of the themes I keep hearing is this thing of people throwing things at us, whether it be in like a Target having a Pride section for a week or a month, or people asking us questions we're not really comfortable with. But I think Maria hit it on the head with just being like, it is going to be a messy thing. But at least I do think, at least they're doing it. They're not like ashamed to be like, I'll never put that rainbow thing in my store. Even if they're doing it to make a buck, it does feel weirdly in the right direction, as much as it might be just to take advantage of people's money or something, which is disgusting. But at least they're like, I don't know. I think that's case by case, and you need to discern yourself if you want to support the people that are doing that. Any other questions? In the front?
My name's Bree. I'm a producer and singer. Thank you all so much. This has been amazing.
Thank you.
I had a quick question. I have been in some spaces recently where the person looping me into a session has kind of given me like a warning, and not a warning that something catastrophic is going to happen, but just a warning that, like, hey, this next person we're going into a session with is pretty conservative. So can you just like tone down politics, tone down, tone it down. And I was just wondering if, in your experience, I mean, you're at drastically different success levels, I think, than some of us in this room, but if you really strongly don't go into those rooms, or if you decide to be yourself anyway in those rooms, or if there are any times when you decide that the work has to come first and you do tone it down, have you experienced any of that, and how do you deal with that?
Jay Hart, you want to take? I feel like
Yeah.
tone it down questions are good for you.
Definitely. I'm very good at being subtle. Listen, I would never advise you not being yourself in a room. And obviously, it's a tricky thing because a lot of us have felt the need to dim ourselves for long periods of time. That's something that I did for a long time and still sometimes do. If I'm around a super masculine energy who reminds me of someone that maybe, you know, used to make fun of me in high school or whatever it is, I shrink and I like go insular. And so I think you have to just, I mean, I would never advise you to not be yourself in a room. I mean, talking about politics is something completely different because sometimes that takes the session off on some other tangent that doesn't really need to happen. But I just think case-by-case basis, if you really feel strongly about it, you don't have to be in the room. But if you think it's a good opportunity, do it. But I would never advise you not to be yourself in any situation. I don't think that that's where the world is going, and I don't think that we need to be setting that precedent at all to shrink ourselves for other people. No.
I think being a songwriter, you kind of are a chameleon anyway, adapting to different people's egos and opinions and things they've grown up on, and they're sometimes from different countries, different types of music, different things they want to say. So in the same way that you adapt per session to just make them more comfortable, I think it's one of those things too, you know, like I know certain sessions I can't come in hot with like talking about how much I love weed or something, because like some people are gonna be like, I don't want to work with a drug addict or something, and like some people I know I can like light up a joint and it's gonna be a vibe. So not that that's the most related thing, I just want to let you guys know I smoke weed in case anyone has a joint. But no, but you know, it's like it's something that it's a skill that you will get better at, and never dim your light if you feel like you're sacrificing something important about what you bring to the table in a session. It's not probably worth it, you know. But if they're just simply saying this person might be shocked if you come in hot with your blah blah blah, I don't think it's always a bad thing. I think it's just be like, for this person to feel safe, you might need to approach it in this way, and maybe you don't have to look at that as a way of losing yourself, but maybe just easing it into somebody who's maybe on a different level of education in that realm or something.
So I guess the question is like, how do you navigate the entertainment business when you're not like a raging extrovert and unbelievably confident performer?
I'll stay quiet for this.
I'm pretty shy and quiet naturally, but I think finding people who feel the same way and finding certain friends brings out a different confidence. And I don't think that it's a place. We're not gonna find a place in the music industry. It's a journey. Like sometimes you gotta go left real quick. Like you gotta like shy away from certain energies. And I think it all goes back to trial and error. Just meeting people, finding people who feel the same way, identify the same as you. And you're gonna be uncomfortable. There's gonna be times where you're like, wow, my pits are sweating. I'm really, this is not my room. You know what I mean? But then you'll know. Then you got to touch the fire a little bit in this. And I think that applies whether or not you're in this community. It's just like, as a creative, you just have to, it's such a sensitive profession. It's kind of crazy that we have to like share our experiences and our whole life in scheduled times, you know what I mean? So I think it's just a matter of trying things out and like moving with the water and like but ultimately just being yourself. And if you're shy, that's beautiful too. People love for people to be quiet. You know what I mean? People are like, oh, thank God. You know, she's like not talking all day, and they find value, and they probably may listen to you more even because the 3 sentences that you said actually they mean the most, and they change the dynamic of the room. So just stay true to you, really. And there's nothing wrong with being introverted. A lot of us are. We're like introverted extroverts.
Yeah, so true.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, and feeling like you don't need to be a certain way or look a certain way to be in the industry. I think just working on your confidence as an introvert and not feeling like you need to change to like fit somewhere. Just being like, this is who I am. I'm the quiet one that comes out with a banger lyric and I think that's tight.
I think the question was more about within the family community than in this music community.
Oh. You mean your actual family?
No.
No, I got the family thing the first time. I liked how you used my word as well. Not my word, but.
I think it's discerning, what does quiet and shy mean to you? Does that mean that you're not necessarily being your fullest self? Because if it does mean that, I would suggest making sure to do the internal work to be the absolute best you that you can be, because it's really important for you as a creative to feel comfortable in your own skin. And I know it's such a journey. I'm still learning myself and learning to love myself every single day. But I think that's step one before ever thinking about how do you fit into this family and into this community. It's more about how do I fit in my own skin? What makes me special? What do I love about myself? And really appreciating that first and foremost, because as you said, this is a very sensitive industry, and people will see that you're insecure about something, and that in the wrong hands is not good. So
I think it just takes time too. I was gonna say it took me a long time after being in music to find my gay community within the music industry. And I think that's just one of those things that just, you can't rush that. You'll find your people eventually. But just being open helps you find those people, and you'll find them. It just takes time.
Something that helps me is just, like you said, hang out with people that you feel supported by and that are in the community, and you'll be like, yeah, we're cool. If I'm in a group of queer women, I'm fucking queer that night. I'm yeah, fucking queer. And then when I'm by myself in a group of straight people, I'm always I'm queer. So I think the best thing you can do is just surround yourself around people that make you want to scream it and be yeah, I'm fucking tight. This is awesome because she thinks so and he thinks so, and we shouldn't need that necessarily, but I think that helps me a ton of being I don't have to go into this as a lone rider. There's a lot of people out there that feel the same. So find them, go to drinks with them, have lunch with them, and actually show create a community around yourself of people that make you feel really seen and really celebrated. And one of my best friends a couple years ago, this girl named Nat, when I met her, I was I was way more femme. I wasn't telling people about my sexuality in my music and just keeping it in this little bubble. And she was 10 years younger than me, but dressed awesome, listened to cool music, had short hair, and still to this day was one of the most influential people finding myself, because she lived so loudly and proudly by herself, and being younger and not having the cool job I had. She was just killing it, and I was oh my gosh, she's so cool. I want to be like that. So not to just say the same thing, but I do think that's very helpful to just surround yourself around people that you want to be like, or that make you feel tight. Cool. In the back, the red, yeah.
Hi, I'm Milo. I'm an artist and songwriter.
Hello.
I was wondering how important it's been to seek out queer and trans people on the business side of things for you guys, publishers or managers, if that's been important for your strategy as a creative.
Trey?
So I started at a gay owned and operated studio, and that for me, looking back on it, was so important for me, because just learning the business and learning how to songwrite, it was so great to also be in a space where I knew I was immediately accepted. So if there are spaces like that, I would highly suggest seeking those out.
Cool. We have just about 10 minutes left, so we'll take maybe a few more questions, just so you guys know. Go ahead.
Hi.
Hello.
My name's Glenwood. I'm a producer from Philly. I just moved to LA 8 months ago.
Sick.
Nice.
Welcome.
Woo!
This is my homie. We were both entering like a business venture with this artist named Yusen, who's a part of the community.
Okay.
And I've never worked with like a queer artist before. So it's like, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't sure if people that would receive the music he would get pigeonholed into doing like pop or like R&B, and I wouldn't be able to produce hip hop with him because I feel like straight cis people wouldn't take it seriously coming from a gay artist. And we had brought up like Lil Nas X, and I thought if he came out and then dropped Old Town Road, it wouldn't have been as big as it hitting #1, and then he's like, yeah, and then it's like it's already #1 now, so you feel stupid. But it's like we were wondering, like, should he be, you know, as outwardly exuberant as he is naturally, just in a room, coming out as an artist, or play it sort of in the middle?
No.
Or see, we don't. I wouldn't know. So if you guys can like shed a light on that, like from a new artist perspective, should you just, you know, be whoever you are and then worry about people later, or is it like
Yeah.
consider that as your music, right? Like, how are people gonna receive this? You wanna be
Never
successful
consider
at the
that.
end of the day.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Like,
so he's asking, do you kind of make the coming out as a public figure, do you kind of make that part of the strategy, I guess? Or do you just lean into it early on? Is that kind of what you're asking? Yeah, I think that's a brave question to ask, so thank you. I think that is on people's minds. Oftentimes it's definitely come into my mind. I have an opinion on that now, but you guys have an opinion on this?
You take it, girl.
Victoria?
Yeah, I do. I think there's such a void for that in music, and honestly, low key, a lot of hip hop artists they do identify in this community, but it's like such a cultural, like unaccepting platform that it's hard, and I'm not gonna lie, it's gonna be really hard for him. But there's going to be so many other people who feel the same way and root for him as well. And I don't think when in the creative process he should ever consider how it's going to be received, only how it's being delivered. Like just from inside out, how he naturally feels, how he wants to dress, what he wants to say. And I think that people respond to realness. And if I look back on Lil Nas X's career, I think though #1 may have given him the confidence, because even in his song, he references a woman. He says, you can go and ask her. So like, I feel like maybe after that, he was confident enough to admit it to the world. But I think you being on his team, if you make him feel comfortable and you're excited about him being 100% himself, 200%, and kind of develop a community for him with people who aren't gonna offend him when they listen to the music, you know, just make a safe space for the rollout, and also forewarn him that, you know, this is going to be a fight because you're going into untamed territory, and hip hop is pretty rude and mean, but on the flip side of that, there's going to be a glorious outcome, I feel, and there's a need for that. We need him. So I would say do not sacrifice anything and let him be flamboyantly himself, if that's who he is.
Yeah, I think it's fair to consider those things, but yeah, I think it's up to him, and if it feels like a time where he's ready to come say these things to the world, then he should. And there's people so ready to, you know, you don't have to win the world over, you know, there's so many people that are ready. You know, I'm thinking of King Princess, who is a new artist who's like really owning her queerness. Someone who I really admire, because when I was her age, I had like Ellen and no one. So when she started saying she was queer, you know, it was just like, I'm sure there was other artists, so I don't want to give her the credit of being the first, but I just like was a young queer woman who was just like, wasn't shying away from it at a time when we're just getting so many of these young, hot, you know, girls that are like straight and sexy and beautiful, and it probably felt like maybe challenging for her at the time to be like, own that, but now she's really leaning into it, because just like Nas X, just being like, you see, like, wait, people fuck with this, you know, So maybe just do it. I mean, I don't know. I can't say for sure what would make you the most money, but maybe that isn't the objective. Okay, so let's take one more question and then kind of wrap things up in the hat.
Hi, I'm Leon, songwriter.
Hello.
You, Trey, you kind of talked about self-acceptance being a journey.
Mm-hmm.
Could you guys maybe talk about moments in your life, things you experienced, or things that you practically do that have helped you on your journey of self-acceptance?
Question is, what do you guys do to help you on the journey of self-acceptance? It's a good question to end on. Thank you.
Yeah, I love that question.
I just invest time, energy, and money too in working on myself. I believe in going to therapy if it's something that is available to you, because obviously there's a lot of stuff that's built up over the years that when you are journeying towards full self-acceptance, a lot of that is undoing the kind of walls and the things that you've built up. So I like to read a lot. I talk to myself in the mirror sometimes. It's cheesy, but I think it's important. And just making that space to grow and to keep evolving, and know that your journey is never over, and you never get to fully, you're always continually evolving and getting better and getting more loving, and yeah.
Trey, I kind of want to hear what you guys, everyone says to this one.
Yeah, sure. I have different mantras that I use. I start out my day with just being like, you're valid, you're worth this, you should be here. Also, I think it's really important, we as creatives, people don't understand, we go into these rooms and we literally like rip our souls out, and that's like sometimes traumatizing because you're literally just going through so many experiences to write the absolute best song. So I think it's really important for you to check in with yourself as well and just be like, I'm feeling kind of tired today. Maybe I need to take a day off. Maybe I need to just go grab a coffee, have a new experience. Like, as cliche as these things sound and as basic as these things sound, they're so important for us and for our mental health.
I agree. For me, I just started doing something called Self-Care Sunday, where it's like whatever it is that I want to do. It could be as simple as a bath bomb, bubble bath. I'm starting therapy this Sunday. I love massages. Like anything that gains or adds to you, or like some simple, really like basic things that you could do. And beyond that, I think it has to do with just doing your best every day, because I find that when I dislike myself, it's because I slacked on something and I'm unforgiving and I'm cycling. I'm like, I'm not where I'm supposed to be, or I didn't do what I was supposed to do. And so when you do, for me, one thing is going to the gym. I'm like, fuck that up. You know what I mean? Like I feel good after that. It releases certain endorphins, and I'm not saying like a physically fit body is the only way to self-love, but it definitely helps you feel like you're adding to yourself, and it's just one thing that you can do to like prove to yourself that you're working also on you. When you give so much to other people and experience so much of other people, we kind of have to be empaths, and when do we get to release all of that for ourselves? So I think those self-care days is when that kind of happens for you. And I think also mantras, positive affirmations, reading, anything that I feel like these are like things that they would have us do as children. They're like, okay, PE, you're gonna have reading, like all of these things you kind of resurge in adulthood, and you do it your style. So maybe those things could help too.
Martin?
I think self-acceptance has to come from a self-awareness. So you have to understand, at least I had to understand, what aspects of myself was I not accepting, and then focus there first. And usually that's where there are like deep wells of pain. And that doesn't sound very fun, but I think part of the self-acceptance is actually really going into what's so painful about your past that has taught you in some way that there's something not worthy of love about you, and really going into that. and taking the risk of, you know, seeing what you discover about how much pain you've experienced. So building your capacity to feel the pain there so that it actually has a chance to metabolize and integrate, and then you kind of feel like, oh, more in your own body or more in your own self. And self-awareness tools, I mean, meditation, card-carrying member. I really highly recommend that practice. I really can't say enough about just the ability to concentrate and to understand this world that lives inside all of us, and see the parts that really need love and compassion, because we all have these like closets and dark corners and attics and basements that we're like afraid to go into. But I think when you do have the courage to go in there and discover, there's a softening that happens around your own heart, and self-acceptance isn't even part of the equation anymore, because it's like, well, what could possibly be unworthy of love? There's nothing to accept. It's all beautiful. But I feel like it's a journey that we're all actually already on and uncovering. And I just want to encourage, you know, everyone here to really like explore your own gender.